Welcome, everybody. We are going to kind of do our session, and then we're going to have a break. And then you have to come back, or else. I'm kidding. Just relax. This is very interactive.
Where did you get the House of Cards?
I wrote it.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. So this afternoon we are, and this is my daughter Imani, and I've already put her to work. Figured that she comes with us, and she's also going to share. But if we could just go around, and I don't see so well at my age, so if you could just tell me your name again. We're going to do a lot of introspective work, a lot of sharing. So this is really easy and free-flowing, and we're going to have fun. Okay? No dancing on the speakers or tables, but we're going to have fun. So if you could just go around and let me know who you are, sure. And if you're just a little bit about your role.
My name is Scott Will, and this is my wife Shelley. Not to speak for her, but it's a guilty version of what's doing. And we are here because our son, who will be 4 next week, is deafblind and is getting ready to move into his first year in a preschool placement.
My name is Barbara Love, and I'm the supervisor for the sensory impaired programs, and I have 13 students with visual impairments and students with hearing loss. We serve them installation.
I'm Crystal from Philadelphia. My sister and I, we would come here together to the low incidence conference and the PAC Special Education Conference. But she became disabled in 2012. Our grandson has Williams syndrome. And so I continue to come, and I gather the information. Of course, we announce the apps. I still give it's more to hands the winner to be involved and see the information and to get that to them. Awesome. Great.
My name is Bart. I have a 2-year-old daughter with bilateral hearing loss, mild and moderate.
And a mild case of cerebral palsy she has.
Okay. Okay. Stay.
I'm Emily Freeburn. I'm a speech therapist, local in the Harrisburg area, the intermediate unit in Harrisburg.
And I'm Becky Boone. I'm lucky enough to be working with Emily. I teach deaf and hard of hearing kids and have for 40 years.
40 years, you said?
40.
40.
Yeah. I'm Liz Kristen. I'm a speech therapist in Cambria, Indiana, and Armstrong County doing early intervention.
Hi, I'm Sue Althouse. I work with Early Intervention Technical Assistance. I'm at the Patton Harrisburg office, and we provide trainings for local programs and statewide trainings as well.
And I'm Stacey Antoniades. I also work for Early Intervention Technical Assistance. We are the training system for our state's EI program. And I work out of the same Patton system office, only in Russia. And we are both speech pathologists also. This is the speech table.
We're going to break you guys up a little bit.
Hi, I'm Kim Jenkins, and I'm a consultant at the Patton office in Russia.
I'm Nan Wood. I was a consultant at the Patton office, and I'm retired, but I do help to coordinate this conference. I was a teacher of the deaf for a lot of years.
They won't let you go.
I'm Jennifer Mernicki-Najunas. I'm with the State Bureau of Early Intervention, and I am out of the Northeast office in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
I'm Rose Bauman, and I'm a parent of a 12-year-old with autism and intellectual disability, and I'm also a parent advisor at the Peel Center, which is the Parent Training and Information Center for the western side of the state. This is my lovely daughter, Lindsay.
I've been dragged here.
I'm Liz Nordberg. I'm another speech therapist. I worked for the IU in the Lehigh Valley for many years, and I just started working in early intervention, birth to 3, so I'm interested in that.
Just a couple of comments on what did you expect out of this workshop? What would you like to learn, accomplish? Somebody made you come.
Oh, just a magic bullet.
Crystal ball. All right, write that one down. Magic bullet.
Anything to help us. We're having particular difficulty now because so many of our parents are Coming from foreign countries, I do not
Okay.
speak English.
Okay.
I'm not talking Spanish, I'm talking a variety
Okay,
of
okay,
languages.
excellent. Good. You're coming to the right place. We're gonna talk a lot about culture today. Anyone else? From a parent perspective, maybe?
I'd just like for the professionals, I'm not trying to be rude, but just to consider us as part of the team because we all want to work together to help our children and we're not fighting them or on the other side. I mean, we all just want to be one team together.
All right. Yes.
As a parent advisor and also a parent who's part of the team, I'd like to get maybe some new ideas for how to collaborate a little bit, more smoothly and help parents advocate from a position that's a little more professional maybe.
Well, we will cover all of that today. Just to give you a little bit of background on why I started doing this. As I shared earlier, I was a parent and got involved in the school at Perkins very heavily. The challenge came when the public school wanted Malik to go to their public school. And believe it or not, their deafblind classroom was in the basement in the back. I had already had that experience. I'm like, I'm not going there. And they just couldn't handle him. And it became this very contentious, many year-long fight to get Malik to stay at Perkins, to allow the Boston public school system to, and then we had to go through litigation, so on and so forth. And that really kind of was my first opportunity in advocating for Malik and learning what it meant to advocate for Malik. And then when I started working in that field, I realized I did wear a dual hat. So I was on the side of advocating, and I understood what the parents went through. But then I started to understand and see the professional side. And I said, well, we need to, kind of marry the two. And so that's why the birth of this workshop. And I was taught by a wonderful, wonderful woman, Beth Harry. She's an educator that did a lot of teaching, even from the 70s. So I was under her. I wasn't under her in the 70s, but she was very instrumental in talking about how culture relates to how professionals work with families, how families learn. And so that's kind of a culmination of that. And so we will make it to what you want it to be. We are parents, professionals, but we are one here. Anything said here is safe. Can we agree to that kind of our norms? Every group has a norm. I like to keep it real. And so if you want to let it rip and say, let's just put our feelings on the side. We're here to just be honest and to learn. Okay? Does that work? Any other norms that we need to just respect and let everyone speak and have a good time? A couple of the objectives today. You guys just said it. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that parents face. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that professionals face. And again, I can stand up here and lecture. I don't want to. So please feel free. This is a conversation. I have a million slides that I will probably fast forward through some of them. So please let this be a conversation because we will learn from one another. But I do hope that you leave with one or two strategies for positive collaboration. Okay, so just to kind of break the ice a little bit, can one or two people, three people share? Think about a situation where you had to collaborate and where positive collaboration occurred and not so positive collaboration occurred. And just maybe think of a metaphor. And when you were in that situation, what did it make you feel like?
We have something called consultation and collaboration with our daycare centers and nursery schools that we work with. And when it works out the way it's supposed to, I feel like it's a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is there for the same reason. And everybody has a place at the table.
Right.
working for that child.
Okay. That's great. It's positive. Maybe a not so positive one, or one that's challenging.
I think it's really difficult when, as somebody who works with parents on a regular basis, when parents get it stuck in their mind that a certain placement is what has to be the placement for their child, and so they're not even willing to look, outside that tunnel vision.
Okay.
I had a parent recently that I was working with who was set on having their child in a specific approved private school, and we, kind of the metaphor was, kind of California or bust. It was like, we're going to go to that school, and I'm not going to name the school. That school, fill in the blank, or bust. And it's very, very difficult as an advocate, as a parent advisor, to talk someone off of that ledge.
As a parent, I've sometimes felt like it's high tide. I'm standing on the beach, and it's just little old me, and there's the great big ocean, and I have somewhere I need to go, and I'm wading in, and the breakers are just, I'm doing my best just to plow on to get where I need to go, but the breakers feel so much more powerful than I am, and they're seemingly innumerable, and they're just never going to stop. On the other hand, you just got to keep going. So pushing against the tide, that's sort of what it feels like sometimes.
Okay. So we got the circle, tide, the ocean, Route 66 here.
And I also want to say too, related to what he's saying, I think the metaphor of an ocean is terrific, because as parents, we experience just these waves of grief.
Yes.
Just they continue to kind of lap over us, when new things develop, and we see that developmentally with year by year, the gap, is widening. And for some of our kids, not all of them, but that's a wonderful, the emotion's a great metaphor.
Excellent. And I'm glad you brought that up. I'll get to you in a minute. I'm glad that there's always one in the class. Teacher's pet, I'm going to put you right here. I love that, the metaphors, and I'm glad you said that, because and that's really my why and passion behind doing this with parents and professionals in a room with locked doors. Because the emotions on both sides are so real and so raw, and oftentimes so similar, but it can be like that brick wall. Each emotion and desire is bouncing across, but the brick wall is here, and it doesn't often get, to understand one another. Yes, my friend.
What you said reminded me of that whole David and Goliath thing. When I go into these are transition meetings for kids that are going to kindergarten in 20 minutes. And the parents come in, and there must be 10 or 12 people, professionals at the table. And these parents walk in, and it makes me feel very protective of them, because I'm the only one in the room that knows them.
Right.
But it also makes me feel sad, because it's like, my gosh, this has got to be scary.
Yeah, it's daunting. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing these meetings for 18 years, and I, still, and where Malik is he's at the School for the Deaf in North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf. And as much as I love them, and I'm on the board there, I'm there often. Walking into an IEP meeting is just, you just bring that wave, and I have to take my professional hat on, but sometimes I have to keep it, it's a challenge. So for collaboration, these are just some underlying principles. The two that I want to look at is the second one, that we are all valued, and that requires a sense of trust and shared responsibility. And that's where I think these are the building blocks, I believe, that everyone is valued. Like I said earlier, we're all the experts of this child. I often say the parents are the experts, but we have experts on both sides. That when we share that responsibility, that we can work to the good. All right, so collaboration, it's a win for everyone. Why do we collaborate? Why bother to collaborate? It's so important that we understand what it is, so that when we go into situations that, I'm here to collaborate. I want the best. And we assume that each individual wants the best for our child. It's just, why do we collaborate? Again, parents want what's best, the professional wants what's best. And if we, again, can marry the both, but it's important to seek to understand what is important to the parents and professionals. And that takes time. And you just said it. Sometimes you have 20 minutes, to go in, or an hour, a time frame. This is not always easy to do. Is assuming that especially if there's a challenge, especially with our children with no instance, there's always something and nothing fits the right way. That's why I like to use the puzzles, because our kids don't fit into the typical. But I think one of the biggest, how can I say, challenges is that we walk in both sides. And it could be an IEP meeting. When I say walk in, we come into the situation with our child with baggage. Have you ever known someone you don't want to ask them how they are? Let's be honest. 'Cause I spent 10 years in ministry. I've learned that. That one sister, you're like, oh gosh, I know she's going to tell me, And you're like, and we've said, oh, that person has so much baggage. They just, and that you can see when someone's weighed down because of what they're experiencing. But I like to change it a little bit and say that we all come in with luggage, and that's what shapes our worldview. So that's why I walk this. This is not my whole presentation. This is not, you must have wondered, what in the world is this child doing? We all walk in with an invisible bag. I'm going to put it up here. It could be our, I don't need this. Our oh, well, I do need it. It needs me. I'm going to do a little exercise, and then I'm going to ask you guys to do the exercise. We all walk in with luggage. So the baggage piece we're going to just put on the side, because baggage has a negative connotation. Can we all agree to that? But we all have our luggage. When I walk into a room, you know what? The analogy I love is a dog. Have you ever seen a dog driving and they're smelling everything? They're out, their face is outside the window, and and I look at when I'm driving, I'm like, I wonder what they're smelling and sensing. They kind of know what's going on, and we're like that little puppy. Is when we walk in, we have a lot of things hitting us at once, and what I may look at and sense is very different than what you do, because of how we've been raised, our background, how we see things, our beliefs. So I'm going to take you through a little exercise just to kind of be honest and real and raw. I'm going to unpack, if I can get it open, I'm going to unpack my luggage for you guys. All right. Imani, I'm going to need you to just hold this. Yeah. And this will give you a little of an idea of what I walk into with. So my name is Janae Amal Nubia Morris. Well, Watkins Warren Morris. I was, raised in the Bronx, New York. Oh, another New York girl. And in fact, we were just there, and I was driving through going, oh my gosh. Well, actually, I was telling Imani all the stories. The poor child is just, I said, oh, when I was here, this is what I did. And when I was there, this is what I did. She's like, Mom, you've told me these stories over and over again. But I was raised in the 80s in New York. One day I'll put these on, but this is just so much fun. With Greece, I had that outfit, I did, including the shoes. Huh? Hers, and the hair. Roller skating, Central Park. I mean, that's kind of what I grew up in. I was raised by do you mind if I just throw these here so can you guys see? By very, very religious grandparents who they're very Southern grandparents that moved with the Great Migration north. My grandmother was iron fist and do right and you'll get to heaven, do wrong, you go to hell. Simple as that. And love your husband and kids. I don't have any husband and kids, but you will. My grandfather was an educator, and he taught us to love our family, religion, and education. At 73, he got his doctorate in religious education. And this was all in the same house. And then I had a mom. This is a little African statue, who was a child of the 60s, burn the bra, fight the war. And so I was raised with a very cultural understanding who I am, not just as Janae growing up in the Bronx, but the world. And that's why I love growing up in New York City. We were sitting in Harlem having lunch, and just the number of people and the diversity going past, I was like, this is what I miss in small town North Carolina, although I love it. I was also raised with, I can't do it now with the scar, by a father. My parents were divorced, but he was Muslim. And I left the Quran upstairs. But I was raised with going to mosque with him and covering my head. So I had a number of worlds that I was in. I ended up marrying my childhood sweetheart. This is us. Oh my gosh. We were, I don't even know, 18 or something. We met at 16. And we had these, you saw the other kids, but we had these lovely children. But before then, even in New York City, this is a book that I got at a synagogue that was doing some work with children. And I was although I was raised in New York, very cultural, African-American family, I was bussed out of my school system. And the children that I went to school with were predominantly Jewish. And we would go to breakfast to the bagel shops in the morning and see their grandparents or parents with not swastikas, help me, with the numbers on. So that was, the next generation. So we were, it was intense. So I was bussed out of my own neighborhood there. So then I would come back in the afternoon to my neighborhood, and I didn't sound like the kids because I sounded different than the kids in my neighborhood. I didn't wear the same clothes, so it was just a constant, who are you? So I just went to the Greenwich Village where everybody could be anybody and just hang out. That's what I love doing. So when Michael and I got married, we had the 3 children. Like I shared, we had Imani first, and then we had Malik. This is kind of the symbol for when our lives change. When you don't have plan A, when plan A doesn't work, you'd have plan B. And this is a bag for milk for Malik's stomach tube. So he still is on. He eats, but he still is on a stomach tube. And I brought this because it just shows, it's just constant care with him. He's doing great now. He's, you saw the picture. He's running, walking. This is a whole nother level now of, I wish he was that little baby that, we were worried about walking. Let's see what else is in my bag of tricks. Can you tell Mary Poppins was one of my favorite growing up? We moved from the north. I was raised in the north, went to college in Boston, got married in Boston. Southern saying for Yankees. And so we moved from the north to the south, and that was a cultural, very, very different. The reason we moved, the weather was better for Malik. And, for the girls, it was just, inner city Boston to, small town North Carolina. you can't raise a child in a better place. But it was a cultural shock, and we get, y'all ain't from around here, are you? That's and bless your heart, that I've learned. Let's see, this is just a shirt, having a child with CHARGE syndrome from the CHARGE conferences. And what CHARGE is, just an acronym for everything that, the challenges that he has. So he's deaf-blind, multi-handicapped, cognitively delayed. So he's 18. His hormones say he's 18, and his attitude says he's 18. Cognitively, he can be 5, 6. It depends. So we kind of, run the gamut with that. Let's see, what else? Apart from the kids and the husband I love reading novels. That's where I got the idea of, my next husband's going to be a Scottish Highlander, rich. That's the Warren. I'm looking for Warren. And, I'm, really learning to take time for me. I don't do that well, but I'm taking time. Just a couple of other things. Something I really believe in is leadership. And I teach and train, especially parents and families, to understand the leader within them. I think in this world of special needs, if you can get through the first year, 2 years, 3 years, especially as a parent, you have so many skills that you don't even realize. And that's one of my passions, is to help parents to learn the skills that they have, like advocacy, and you don't realize yet, or how to navigate the wave and and to be able to use that to help other families and to collaborate. So that's a little bit about me. Just this was a kind of something I'm proud of. Malik and I made it to the Odyssey, and then I also, apart from this teaching and training, I work as a parent educator at Beginnings. Am I forgetting anything else in there? Well, this is dates. I did have a 17-year-old, so but she's now 19. I have 3 teenagers, so if that tells you anything about me. And then I always keep this because it just reminds me of how grateful I am. When I first started doing this, I do this workshop a lot. Look how tiny it is. Malik absolutely can't fit that. Now he's potty trained. So this makes me grateful and is my visual that he's going to the bathroom on his own. He may not be able to write his name, but if he can go to the bathroom on his own, we can get a stamp. I keep it in perspective. But so that's my world. That's how I see the world. When I walk into a room, I say, okay, who's here? What, how diverse is it? Where is so-and-so from? I hear an accent and, what are your beliefs? That's how I process. And then as I process it, that's how I can conduct. And I love being a chameleon. Moving to the South was harder for my husband than me because my grandparents are Southern. But I can go in there and put my pearls on and bless your heart as much. Really, honey? No, she didn't do that. Oh, God forbid. And I'm being dramatic here, and I love my Southern folks. But I can then step in, and we were just in New York and I'm driving like a bat out of hell, yelling at people and beeping my horn, and I think that is a gift that I have, and just kind of be molding. Not everybody has that, and that's okay. But that's how I see the world. So I am going to ask you lovely people to do what I just did, but not in front of everybody. I think it's important that we do self-reflect and we figure out who we are. We know who we are, just telling someone else. So I'm going to ask you to break up. I think we can do groups of 2s. Try to pick someone you don't know, like this table we're going to break up. If you're here with a spouse or a good friend, find someone you don't know. And just share how you would describe your culture, what aspects are important to you when you're working with a family, or if you're working with a professional. What's important to you? What drives you? And then just think about a time when those values conflicted. Okay, so if you just, I think we can do 2. Let's try 2, and then if there's an extra person, we'll have them join a group. And what I'd like is, there are no rules. You can share as much as you like or as little as you're comfortable with. The only thing I would ask is that you let the other person talk when it's their turn. I'm not saying that for anybody specific in the room. No, just practice active listening. And I'm going to give you about 7 minutes each. I'll tell you when to switch. It's really not a lot of time. Talk to me at the end of 7 minutes. All right, so get up and break. And I'm going to put my stuff. There we go. And if you're really going to tell secrets, you can pick a corner or something. All right, you can go. And I'm eating some chocolate. Wow. You guys can talk. That's great. This is my favorite part. If I could let you do this for 3 hours, I really would. How did it feel talking, sharing, being listened to? Any aha moments? This is your time to, if you just invite you to share it. Share how you felt. Oh my gosh. Everybody's crying. Oh, it's fine.
Well, I always enjoy getting to know another individual, and the way this was set up, is you know more than just like how are you, I'm from here, I'm from there, and it's nice to meet you. And you really get to, know quite a bit about us doing this. So that was very enjoyable.
I think it was interesting because we both come from, pretty different cultures, if you will, but our cultures and our connection with our cultures provide us with really similar values.
Right.
So I think that was pretty, that on the surface, it may seem like you're so different from somebody, but when you really get to know someone, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of similar values, I think.
Anyone else want to share? Scott?
It just struck me, both in terms of what Rachel was saying, and as I was listening to myself talking, it's nigh impossible to maintain a perfect objectivity in any matter. You're just bringing these things to the table with you, and you're so close to it you don't realize, but some of these things impact you on such a profound level that they inform your thinking completely, and you're not even aware of it. And that it takes a wee bit of courage and a good bit of honesty to back away from your situation and try to look at it from the outside in order to see it as the other person sees it. If you could develop that skill set, I think it would go a long way toward enhancing collaborative efforts.
I'm going to get you, my friend. You said something very profound. Enhancing that skill set, building on that skill set. And I think about when you have, the parent and the professional in the room. Again, there's not a lot of time, but there is room. And that's part of what I like to help people believe. There is time, how you use that time. And mostly with our children, we're building relationships over time with similar doctors, similar educators. And it's what we do with that time that will build those bridges.
I always like to ask when the parents come for their first IEP meeting, I always like to ask them how they met. And
I like that.
You learn a lot about people just by asking them how they met.
I like that. That's great.
And it makes me look at them more like,
right,
the real people.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
It was kind of nice for me to kind of explain to somebody who doesn't know me, that where I came from and how I was raised in a completely different type of environment in which I now serve families.
Interesting.
Down to the sports team that I root for.
Yeah.
And Steelers are huge, and I can't stand the Steelers.
Okay. See, this is when we have coffee.
I'm a Browns fan, I'm sorry. And so going into these houses and that, in Western Pennsylvania, and just, sitting on their Steelers blood.
Look at her face. face. This is what we need to tape, that face.
It's terrible time. But I mean, even something as kind of trivial as that, but it's not trivial.
Right.
I mean, my husband and I laugh because when you look on the news and people are getting interviewed on the news, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go put on the best thing that I own. The best thing they own is the Steelers jersey because it costs like $85. That is like, they're like, I'm really gonna be looking good because I've got my,
Right.
Palomalu jersey on or whatever. But I mean, and even just something as simple as that, I have to, as a professional, swallow it and smile and be neutral, whether we're talking politics, whether you're talking religion, whether you're talking, what they're putting in their baby bottle, that might be super those types of things. That's not why I'm there. I'm not there to tell you that you should be feeding your kids something different or you should be doing. I need to just say that's not what I would choose for me, and I'm just going to let it go, to a degree. I mean, certain times you have to educate your team, but you just kind of have to swallow it down. And it's really to hear myself say all the things that I was raised with and all the things that I encounter in my work and how opposite they are.
Thank you. Interesting. Anyone else? All right. It was one. I love this because I like just seeing people. At first it's hard to get started, and then you just keep going and going. And you can just, the more you share, the more you realize how much is in there. And the other piece is that the other person is a captive audience. Because we don't often, it's true, we don't often share, hi, how are you, Rachel? What would you say? Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. And some of that is because she doesn't know me. She's not going to tell me her business. But am I really going to receive it, the way? Am I going to say, Rachel, how you doing? And then you tell me, if you only know what my morning was like. The kids were up at 3, and, And so that's why I love this, because there is that interchange, which is so very important. And like you said, finding out the stories. This next piece, unless anybody has comments, and feel free to comment as we go along, is taking your luggage to work. I'm going to do a little bit of, not lecturing, just sharing some slides with you. We're going to talk about culture, cultural reciprocity, and then we're going to try to get you up, and then Imani has a little thing that she's going to share about being a sibling and watching the parent-professional collaboration work and not work and how it affected her. And then we're going to stop, I think, and then we're going to have a break and then come back and do some scenarios. And so as you're sitting there, if you need paper, let me know, or borrow some. Just write down a scenario or something that you are encountering now or will encounter or whatever, that you can apply the principles that we learned to. So that's what we're going to do the latter part of the afternoon. We're going to get in groups. And you can share, I'll probably ask you to do groups of 3 and you guys work on that scenario together and then report out, and then we'll take time for questions at the end. Sound good? Okay. And you could keep me abreast of the time as well. So taking our luggage to work. Obviously, culture pervades everything that we do, as we all see. That's why I like to do that exercise before, because it does. Everything that we do, culture pervades. Let me ask this though. If I were to ask you, what does culture mean? What would you say? Would you say it's just race and ethnicity? It's traditions and values, exactly. So when I use the word culture, that's what I mean. D, all of the above, everything that makes us who we are. Cultural beliefs underlie the legal requirements. Our knowledge base, science, spirituality, how we treat disabilities. And when just a little caveat, within the Western American culture. And it also how we practice, how we set goals, how our families set goals, how they interact. Rachel probably hated that I talked to her and shook her hand. She could have, I don't know. But, that's my interaction. I'm in your face and, I have this one friend, I just saw her in Boston. I hadn't seen her in a while. And she walked in the room and went right like this and gave me the biggest hug. But she was talking to me like this, and I'm going, I forgot. Her culture is right here. And I'm like, I hope I had a mint or something. But it also pervades our belief on good parenting. This is what I would like to share. This is a strategy, let me say that, on building cultural reciprocity. So what is reciprocity? Reciprocity is being able, it's really give and take. The easy way to say it is a give and a take, or really both giving. Respecting and learning about someone else's culture while sharing the information with families regarding, say, the American culture. I should have put that in quotes. It could be any culture. But since we are here in America, and really a lot, we are following the norms of our country, okay? That's an assumption. Again, the key is self-awareness. It's being aware that we all, as individuals, come into a situation, come into the room with our own luggage. So what are the steps? Reflecting on our own biases and assumptions. We have them. We all have them. It's what we say when we get behind closed doors or in the car, or, we often called it when we would have staff meetings in the ministry. It was the talk on the way home. Can you believe what they have on us do? This is ridiculous. The talk on the way home really is, those are our biases. We all have them. Step 2 is listening to parents' perspective, inviting them. Like you said, tell me how you met. Tell me what you know about your child. Tell me what you understand. And then explaining your perspective as the service provider. Okay, so this is what I'm seeing. This is my vision. And this is how I think we can work together. And then identifying the common ground. 4 very, very simple, they don't seem simple all the time, but 4 steps to reach the goal. These I just listed. We can list some, you're welcome to list some more. A lot of times our parent-professional conflicts have to do with our values and culture. It's the clash between the culture and our cultural differences. Parents in denial, grieving. I think you said it about the grieving. How do we handle that? At which stage are they at? Well, shouldn't they be further along? The child's 4. Shouldn't you have moved past? We may not always say it, and then you have a parent whose child, people are at different points of grieving. We'll talk about that. How they participate. That is huge. Some are, don't feel empowered, or they don't understand some of the language, or it may just not be their nature. Cultural definitions of what's normal. You just, like you said, what goes in the bottle? What's normal for my family, you may not do that, but it may be normal for another family. Normal and even acceptable or even healthy. There could be physical and spiritual interpretations, as well as identity and group. Yes?
First one about grief. I think that's important, and most people, I'm a bereavement specialist, also an ordained minister. Most parents, I don't think, realize or understand that they are grieving.
Yes.
I just don't think they know what's happening.
Right.
Whether the child is born with a disability, or whether the kid is 22 and is in a car accident and is now paralyzed. I believe that a lot of parents, they go through a grieving process because one is going through grief when they suffer a loss. So even if the child is born disabled, and well, he or she may not ever walk or see or have children, you're suffering the loss that they may never walk or marry and have children. Then if your kid is 27 and is in a car accident, now he's paralyzed. Then now the individual may go through it also, but you as a parent, now you're sitting there going, she may never marry. She may never have kids. I'll never have grandkids. That's grief, and that's grief. But sometimes we don't understand. We only usually tie grief to death.
Right.
Well, your kid's alive, but you still are going through a time of grief because that the child is suffering a loss, but you, as mom, you're also going through that loss period too. And I just don't think parents know.
Right, you're right. Can you speak up just a little, just project a little?
When I'm working with the staff that I supervise, sometimes they'll vent, you'll hear things, and you want to remind them too that this parent's grieving now. They're going from early intervention to school age.
Right.
They're going from school age to transition into adulthood, and every time there's that change, a family's facing that difference. And I think that's really important. I think it's a really good point for all of us.
Excellent. And I think as parents, we just kind of keep it moving. We don't realize if we're sluggish or what. You have to, or you're tired, or your get up and go has got up and gone. And we also live in a society where grief is death. And as parents, we're not often allowed to grieve continually. A good friend of mine did her doctorate on chronic grief. And she has also had a son who, in fact, just died with Charge syndrome. And her theory, which I agree, is that parents with children, especially if, low incidence, severe special needs, it's a chronic grief. It's not just, okay, you grieve that the child won't A, B, C, and D. But at different points, like you both were saying, there is that grief. It may look different, but it hits you, and it hits you and you don't realize it a lot of the time. Like I was saying earlier, when Malik, I was anticipating my grief of him turning 18 and being declared independent. And in fact, that morning, I just kind of wrote out a little blog about what I was feeling, about, celebrating 18 and everyone else's, kids. And then here I am about to, go through this. Of course, he made a big joke of it, as Malik would do. Thank you, Malik. But that was, it hits you at different points. In fact, when this friend of mine's son literally 3 weeks ago passed away unexpectedly, he and Malik were very good friends at school, and then they moved to another state, and then he died. I felt like I had lost a child. And I was like, what is right? I was feeling for her. And then I said, why am I not? But for me, that could have been Malik, and not to look at the negative, but that will be, I will outlive Malik one day. It's a given. I may have accepted it, going through the stages, but that was very real for me. As opposed to, he's had some other friends that have passed, but it's like, this is Malik's friend, so it's a chronic thing.
There was a show one time where there was a young man who was crying, and his girlfriend's dad came in and said, oh, what are you crying for? Men don't cry. I mean, unless you get your foot caught in a bear trap or something. And there's this, coming to the table as a parent, and you're exactly right, that it's an ongoing thing, and you try to process that as you're going along, because you just don't have time to say, time out, let me deal with this as I really need to deal with this, and then we'll get back to life, because life doesn't stop for you. I would love to be able to bring that to the table, but to get back to my initial story, there's a certain strain within the overall American culture, perhaps more inherent to males than females, but maybe not, that exposing that side of you makes you vulnerable. And when we come into a meeting where we're interacting with those on the other side of the table, whether they be educators or professionals or administrators, whoever they are, the last thing we want to do is, in some circumstances, is come in and seem vulnerable. It feels like our shields are down. We're afraid we're going to be taken advantage of. We're afraid that We're going to leave ourselves open and we're going to miss something. Something's going to slip through the cracks. So I just share that within this room. I just share that with all of you. Something to keep in mind, that when the parents are coming to the table, they are most certainly dealing with things. You hit the thumb on the nail, as one of my professors used to say. But we're trying to push those things down, not just because life keeps going, but also because we're not ready to put all our cards on the table with you yet.
And also, if we really faced and allowed ourselves to see the big picture, we may not be able to stand it, which is hard. I think that's where the clash can come in, because a lot of the professionals want us to see the big picture, and it's important. So on the other side, you've got to see the big picture. You have to make these goals. We have to figure out what is going to, when I walk in with a family, one of the things I talk about is what communication mode would you like to use based on your child's hearing loss. These are the different communication modes. And sometimes I feel terrible because the baby is in the arms. They don't know. They just got the hearing aids, luckily I have the luxury of working with the family over time, but that's one that's important. And we've had many discussions at work of when do we talk about that? When the baby's in arms, they just got the hearing aid, you want to talk about a communication mode? I can't think about that right now because I'm trying to deal with, and so, but if you want an implant, we need to, move. There are things that we need to do. So it's a challenge on both sides. Anyone else? The physical and spiritual definitions, one of my favorite books. I'm sure many of you have read it. When it catches you and you fall down. Has anyone read that? It's an old book, and it's about a Hmong family who has a child that has seizures. And the family the medical world and team wants to intervene. And the educational team wants to intervene. And the family, the mother, first of all, she feels like she's guilty. It's something she's done. And it's something that is being visited from her ancestors on her. So, and then she's at odds with her husband because he's looking at her like you've done something wrong. But then she's believing that it's just a spirit catching her. It's just really nothing wrong. And so it's a very long and intense book. It's good, but it talks about the clash between the medical professionals, but then the collaboration. There was one social worker that realized and really helped both understand and come to a good conclusion. So it's the spirit catches you and you fall down. Here in the West, we believe, science, emphasizes, science is the emphasis. I have a lot of my families that, with the hearing loss, they want to fix it. Okay, let's just move on and fix so that we can, and not realizing, again, the crystal ball isn't there, that there is a process, to that. There are some families that I have that say, we're fine, we're just going to use sign language, we're not going to, have any technology. And it's interesting to hear those families, they're the ones that are getting the challenges. Well, when you have all this technology, why are you just choosing ASL? So it can be on both. Again, we talked about that individual and group identity. How many of you had some families that walk in and everybody walks in? Okay? Or some walk in and just one person. You only see one parent. Most of the time it's the mom. When I had Imani, my mother was in the room. She brought, it was a community thing. She wanted to turn it into, my husband's like, does she have to turn everything into, act like we're in an African village with, with music? And, he's not into that. He wasn't into the community. When we had my mother, who's a psychologist and a grandmother. We had Michael's sister who works in the medical. We had a whole team to talk to the doctors to help us to decide. Sometimes it's just one person. Also, what are the roles in the families? That's something that's, we're in a changing society, a role-changing society. As professionals, we're taught, okay, let's diagnose and treat. I do think it's changing. I do. In terms of black and white diagnose and treat. I feel like it is the shift is, okay, what, let me hold that thought. The second one, real expert. Like I said, we are both the experts. That I do think is changing in, especially when you're working in our field, the early intervention, the fields where we have the time with the families. I do feel like family input is getting to be more appreciated. This is something that I think is very important. What is the history? Like we said earlier, building trust is one of the most important things. And it is important to know what history have you had as a family when you're walking in. You may not know that, but even with some of the questions, like you said, just asking some of the questions that may not be, that may not have to do with diagnostic or treatment. I have some that we can talk about at the end. But how do we build trust? In this, it could be that, when Malik was first born, we had a doctor that walked in and said, oh, simple plumbing job, we'll fix it. I was a day out of the hospital, and this is what he said. Lost trust right there. I said, give me another doctor. That's when I realized I could fire doctors. When Malik, a couple weeks ago, had his G-tube replaced, I didn't know the surgeon. He walks in and he says, oh, you guys are from Boston. Let me tell you where I trained. It was amazing. He trained under the same doctor that did Malik's surgery and put the G-tube in. Trust was built just like that. And so it, because our history, one of the doctors we had just talked to on Malik's team was, oh, I don't know, Malik had a hernia. I don't know what we're going to do. And he's scratching his head. And we said, okay, he's done. And we were literally looking it up because we had lost trust. And then this guy comes in and says, oh, this will work. I was trained by the best. And, trust was built. But he didn't know the history. He didn't know that 10 minutes ago, I was almost in tears because this doctor was clueless on what to do and not giving us hope with Malik. So history. Also, it could be cultural history. How has the family, by the family's culture, how have they been treated by physicians? Who do you look at when you're in a room? I know that's a big one. Do you look at the mom all the time? Do you go back and forth? There's a friend of mine has a video of 3 people, a speech pathologist and a mother and a father. And the speech pathologist, we use this as what not to do, only looks at the mother and didn't realize that the father is a stay-home dad taking care of the child. And he really understands more than the mother. How is our language? Are we stopping to take time to really help the families understand, especially at the younger ages? I know we all joke about the acronyms. We can, go on and on, but really helping them to understand what is the medical terminology? What does this mean long term for the child? And are we providing not only translators or interpreters, but ones that understand the person's culture? I think that's very, very important. In our area, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking families from many different cultures, and the best interpreters are those that really understand the culture and some of the cultural norms. Again, the power of the written word, I'm going to kind of keep it going. What is the participation structure? This, I think, is important. One thing that helped me early on is someone said to me, how would you like this information to be delivered? And how would you like to be, what would your participation level like to be in this? What is your norm? What do you think is important? And I had to stop and think. In our family, we want to be very informed. We, give us the words, give us the terms, we'll look it up. If you don't have time to tell, we really want to know what's going on. There are other families that can't handle all of that. But really asking the family, how can I deliver this information to you? And then checking in. You know, there's a lot of information we have to give. How's this going? You know, watching if are the eyes glassing over? I'm watching you guys, your eyes glassing over. You know, how are they interpreting what you're saying? But really letting the family lead. I like this, you know, we say it comes from the home, and it does. You know, sometimes we can use that, well, it comes from home, it's just their culture. Well, it is. And we have to remember that, you know, we have the child in a certain atmosphere, but then they go home. You know, how you have the child and you're wondering, how are they acting at home? You know, do they have any home training, and what's going on at home because of how they're acting at school? I think those are some things that are very important to understand. All child rearing is cultural. I'm going to skip that. The changing of the family role and structure and authority. You know, it's good to see even amongst here the different age, you know, generations. You know, what you, and I'm picking on you because you're my friend. No, you said you had 40 years experience. So as 40 years experience and you are about 12, you know, what you have learned and what you will learn now is very different than what you've had to learn. Younger parents,
They know all the tech stuff.
they know all the tech stuff, exactly. There's an app for that. You know, young parents, and I'm kind of in the middle, you know, what's happening. I'll go to a charge conference, and all the younger parents have their phones out and their apps out, and there's an app for this, and put this on the iPad for Malik, and why don't you have this? And I'm going, I don't even know how to turn it on. Help me to figure it. Just take my tablet and do it. You know, I mean, Malik's even better than me. I mean, I've had to get up to speed, you know, which makes me feel terrible because, you know, I feel like a terrible mother that he doesn't have every app on, you know, on my thing. But, you know, the generations have changed. We have, our family structure doesn't look like it used to be. You know, parents, we have very, very different parenting structures. And we also have to watch our assumptions. You know, we teach, I mean, I teach my girls, go to school. You know, when Imani first went to college, it's a small Christian college in Texas, and a friend that had went there said, oh, she's gonna go and get an MRS degree. I said, she better not. She better get her MA, PhD, then maybe an MRS degree. But he met his wife there. And that was their belief and culture. She got an MRS and they're happy. Not my kid, you know. And so that's just an example of the clashing of cultures. And also about authority. Who is the authority? Is the professional the authority? Some will come to you and say, you're the authority, just tell me what to do. You know, and then you have families like us that are tough. We bring everybody in and say, you know, we're on equal plane. Families at risk. You know, there are the factors, including, you know, what I have listed here. But you know, in terms of having vision about what I said earlier, yeah, there are some risk factors that we have to deal with our children, sometimes the atmosphere they're in. But even using, well, that's a at-risk family, or the child is, but do we often look at the things they are surviving through and living through that really can give them the resilience that they need to really be able to. So my point is not to make assumptions. And even on the families, you know, well, I'm just trying to do this on my own, or I'm raising a child by myself, or whatever the issue, you know, they're in the hospital all the time. Yes, but how can we make that into a strength? What tools are we learning from that we can put in our toolbox? Any comments, questions? Are we going? It's 3, okay. This is just a funny picture about, you know, just sometimes our cultures can clash, you know. Some of us are better at keeping the straight face than others. The last one, first first-hand knowledge of the home, really pulling our families out and saying, tell me about your home. You know, one thing I often ask is, who knows about the child's hearing loss? And how did you tell them? How did they react? That is a telling question, because I had one family from India. Both parents were physicians. The child had Waardenburg syndrome. And I asked that question. They said, nobody. We're not telling our family in India, and we're not going to visit until we have this fixed. That was very telling. You know, and I'm thinking in my American way, you're a physician. It's okay. It says, nope, because we can't show our family the weakness. We have to show that it's already fixed. You know, but really, that's a telling question. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, still, Malik can hear nothing. He's profound. That boy can hear me. You know, she's convinced, so I have to let her believe that, you know, because she's convinced he can hear. You know, that's a whole nother lesson. And then just parent responses. You know, sometimes yes is not always yes. Sometimes yes can mean. You know, so going back, what do you understand about what we talked about? You know, the silence is not always golden, or sometimes it can be golden. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let Imani, just for a couple of minutes. I asked her to share, because Imani and Malik were 13 months apart, she learned to walk in the hospital. She's had a very amazing, I think, and unique perspective of how the professionals, what worked and what didn't work, because she was always there and grew up in it. So I'll give you a minute to share, and then we'll take a break.
Well, pass the mic to her. Okay. Well, I'm going to pass this around. You can just go right, and there's pictures of me and Malik growing up, and you can see what he looks like now.
I can't get it.
I don't know where you want to. Okay, so Malik and I, like she said, are 13 months apart. So I was always there. I mean, I don't remember a time without my brother. And so because we were so close, I grew up watching my parents experience what they experienced. I mean, they were in the hospital, they were grieving. I was there while they were grieving. I mean, I was right there with them on my mom's hip all the time. So I got to see what the professionals in their life, the professionals at the time, how they were affecting my parents emotionally, and how they were supporting us. And because Malik was so sick, we basically lived in the hospital. Like she said, I took my first steps. I mean, we had every holiday in the hospital, we used to say from Halloween to my birthday in February. That's when we'd be in the hospital. That was our hospital period, in and out all the time. And so the nurses were my first friends. They're the ones who I talked to, and I did understand, you know, they had work to do. I mean, I couldn't just, you know, I thought all these women were here to play with me all the time. And they did, and that's what made me feel so comfortable in the hospital. I didn't feel like the hospital was a hospital. It was my home. I mean, we had, you know, they let me sleep with my brother because he was more comforted when I was there. And they weren't allowed to do that. I mean, they snuck me in. I mean, I was 2 years old, and they snuck me in and let me hold his hand when he was in the ICU. So little gestures like that really, I mean, made me feel like I was a part of it. And also, my parents never lied to me. They told me, Malik might not live until tomorrow morning. At 3 years old, imagine a 3-year-old hearing that, and my best friend is my brother. But that really helped me, because I realized life is precious, and you know, I might have to kiss my brother, you know, goodbye, and he might not be there in the morning. But that honesty is the thing that stayed consistent through his whole life, and that's what really kept me going. Because if my parents said, you know, oh, Malik's gonna be okay, and then the next day, you know, then I might have a lot of resentment and things like that towards them. But just the honesty, and the honesty of the doctors. I mean, because my parents allowed me to be in every meeting that I wanted to be a part of. They didn't force me to do anything. But because he was my best friend, I thought of him as my baby doll, because, you know, I could feed him, and there was a point where he would only let me feed him through the bottle, because my mom didn't breastfeed with him. He would only let me feed him and touch him. My parents couldn't even touch him. He would let me do it. So I still had, in one of those pictures, I still have my binky in my mouth, and I'm feeding him his bottle. So that's how we really, and we slept in the same crib. We were so close. But for the professionals to let me be in there, let me be involved, I mean, it was the best experience because I felt like I was a part of the team, the support system. I wasn't, I didn't have to sit outside, but I also had the opportunity, if I wanted to sit outside, I didn't have to be in everything, but just the opportunity to be a part of his life and forever, for how long he lived. And when he grew up and when he got healthier, his teachers, the early intervention people, became part of our family. They were, like I said, they were my friends because no one else understood. Other 5-year-olds weren't understanding, why I'd rather spend time at the hospital than play in the playground. But the teachers and things like that, they were in our home. They were the ones who could understand me, the ones who I could talk to and they would actually listen. And I could say, Malik has charge, and they would know what that means, or anything that I struggled with, I could talk to them because they were there. So we grew really, really close to a couple of his teachers. They really became part of our family. We used to travel with his teachers because the teachers, like I said, they became my big sisters. They were my support system. They really took us in as family. And I know in every situation you can't do that. You have a certain amount of time with them, but just making the siblings feel like they are part of the team. Even if it's just, oh, what do you think about this? I mean, I still go to IEPs when I can, when I'm home. This past month, my mom said, we had a rough time in the hospital with my brother, and he had surgery, and so I took off work, my mom took off work, my dad took off work, and we just stood and sat in the hospital room. It was like old times. But my mom allowed me to be the first one to go in because you're only allowed to have one person post-op. And she let me go in and hold his hand because I comfort him. And even the medical staff was like, are you sure? Wait, how old is she again? Are you sure? But just she let me be a part of his story again. And just holding his hand, even though I was only there for a couple minutes and then my parents came in, but just letting me be a part of his experience was the best thing, because I still feel at almost 20 years old, I still feel like I'm his support system, and he's still my best friend, and we're still really, really close. But having the professionals accept me as a person and not just, okay, she's just a bother, she's gonna cry through this or whatever, she's not gonna understand, she shouldn't hear this. We want to hear it. I mean, as siblings, we want to know what's going on with our siblings because they are our friends, they're our family, and to have professionals ignore you as a sibling is the worst thing. I mean, we've had people who, it's like, oh, Imani, you can't be in here. And I'm like, be in here. I could tell you more things about my brother than sometimes my parents can. But just, even if it's just a small question, bringing the siblings in, I mean, it's really the best thing when professionals acknowledge you as a person and not just as a bother or, oh, I can only talk to the parents. Because a lot of the times the sibling is the only friend of the child with special needs. So they do know them on a more intimate level than even a parent could know the child themselves. So. And if you have any questions, you can ask.
This might be a good time. Any comments, questions before we take the break?
Okay, so
That's the loaded question.
I was in speech therapy. But then I changed because I realized I am always around kids with special needs, and I have a long future ahead of me, and I can always change it if I want to. So I'm in international studies right now in business. But it's funny enough, I come back in the summer, and I'm working with kids with special needs. I mean, I can never leave it. It's my heart. So.
Any other questions, comments, just about? Yes.
And it's just my opinion based on how Imani shared that it was, I don't know the word, okay, small word, it was so good of you all to realize that she, at 1, 2, and 3, being so close in age, was such an integral part of what you all were doing as parents with Informal League, that she was as much a part of that because she was so close. And there was no older sibling, and you didn't leave her on grandma. So you all realize that, you know, she is as much a part of this as we are, and you kept her involved. And then you, as you got older, you said, yeah, you know, he's not a pain and he's not an annoyance because mommy gets all the attention from mom and dad. I like this kid, you know, and I want to be a part of his life as you got older and as he needed you. I think I don't have, now my son who was 21, hallelujah, about to start his 4th year at Cheney Political Science, and my daughter's 28, she's born, thank you, Lord. But my son, he was many years ago diagnosed with ADHD, ODD, and he had a severe eating disorder. And my daughter is 7 years older than him. Wow. Yeah. And what I did was, I was like, you know what, she's a kid. And you know, she's 7 years older, so she's 8, he's 1. She's a kid. I'm gonna keep her in the child's place of happy-go-lucky, joy, fun, games, and play, and not get this 8-year-old child involved in my adult decisions with this special needs child. Whereas there were no older siblings. For her, she had cousins. So I chose to keep her, you know what, 8-year-old kid, be a kid, and enjoy the child's life. Now my son said last week, they're 21 and 28. Now that, my son said this, now that they're older, he said, I'm just getting to know her, and we're just getting to know each other. To me, it was absolutely the best thing that you all did with Employee Mind. It was actually the best thing that I did with my child. Yes. And I think parents here, individually, you have to decide what you're going to do with and for your children, as it involves the child with special needs. Yes. So, thank you. Just thank you for that. Thank you.
Can I tell you something? Yeah. What I'm thinking, am I allowed to have her name?
He's taping.
So I think he's recording you. Yeah, he's recording you too.
Okay. What some parents or professionals don't realize is that we see things, and we we see our parents, you know, with the tears in their eyes. We see them frustrated at the doctors. We see that, and seeing that, we want to help if we can. You know, if we want to be involved, and even if it's just a small thing, you know, just telling, okay, you know, you can play with your sibling for this amount of time or whatever. That is really important. Just because we kind of know what's going on. Even if you keep the child separate, we still know what's happening. And it's funny because my sister is 6 years younger or 5 years younger than my brother. And so their relationship is completely different than what my relationship is like with my brother. Because I was holding his hand in the hospital. She's barely seen him in the hospital. So they have to have their own relationship because she's the younger one. But as the older child, we see a lot. And I think if you keep us out of it, at least in my situation, if I had been kept out of it, I would have felt so alone because no one else could get it. My parents were talking to me like I was an adult because that's what I needed. But like you said, you have to see what your child needs. Because at 4 years old, I was a lot more mature than most 4-year-olds. And I mean, not like bragging, but I mean, it's true. I mean, and my mom even says, like, I could run a household now because I act like I'm 30 years old. Because I really did have to grow up, and it's awesome that she was able to be a child. But, I mean, I chose not to be a child because I thought I had to be the support system for my parents. And I don't regret anything because I'm still their support system. We're each other's support system. But like you said, you have to know what's best for your child.
I think this is a good time for a break. So do we need to say where?
Right here.
Oh, no, the snacks.
If you just go.
If I could ask you to write some of those down because you will get a chance to work on some of those scenarios.
We found out we've readopted mothers at this table, so that's a whole different issue.
Wow.
That's
So next time you're teaching. That's wonderful. Wow. Ooh.
But I'm done there.
In more ways than one. Where's my clicker thingy? Those pretzels were fabulous. Shh, don't tell anybody. I had to make myself not go back. So we have about an hour left. The last part, I'm going to put you guys to work. And it's so great listening to the conversations and what we've learned. And I'm going to leave a little bit for the end just to ask questions and we can help one another. These are just three strategies for collaboration. Sorry. We talked about cultural reciprocity. These are not the end all and be all, but these are two that I have seen worked, I've used myself, and that just, for your information. Okay, the 4 R's. We did talk about cultural reciprocity. The 4 R's. Active or reflective listening. Having the desire to really understand what the other person is saying. And you can listen, but a lot of times you can listen 2 ways. Okay, really help me to understand what you're saying. I keep picking on you, Rachel. You're right in front of me. Or I can listen to Rachel with an agenda. Okay, I already know what I'm going to say to her, so I really half listen, and I miss some of the critical pieces. Or I could say, what are the critical pieces? Help me to understand. Restate what they're saying. Okay, what I hear you saying is. Rephrase. Help me to understand, is this what you're saying? With a question mark. Reflecting the message back, looking for their cues that they understand, or allowing them to clarify. And, I just heard you talking about that, not getting tied into the emotional interchange. So often when, especially when it's something we're passionate about, our profession, our children, our livelihood, the emotions can come up very quickly. So it does take practice. Say, okay, I'm not going to react to this. I'm going to respond rather than react, which, as a New Yorker, that was my New York sister here. I went, this is an aside, we spent some time in New York with my mother, and she's tried and true. And I've been away from home since 18, Boston, living in the South where things are just calmer, and, you just take more time. And my mother's reacting to everything, and I'm going, this is exhausting, But that's her world. An iMessage. Now, an iMessage, and this is really great when there's a conflict that has happened or you're in the midst of a conflict. You focus on you rather than what you said hurt my feelings. Now, that might be true, but I was hurt by some of the things that you said. And making it personal. It also allows you to take responsibility, because most of the time when we're in a conflict, unless the person's really antagonistic, most of the time they don't mean to antagonize you purposely. So it allows you to say, that hurt me because, and it gives you an opportunity to explain that to the person. Again, the you message, it focuses right on you. You did this, and it can, build up a wall rather than this is how it made me feel when you do that. The 4 parts of an iMessage. It describes the person's behavior. You're not blaming. You cut me when I was speaking, I didn't feel like you were listening to me. Rather than, why do you always cut me off when you talk? You say what the facts are and how it made you feel. And then you can let them know, this is what will work for me. It's funny, I love my mother, but I'm going to just use her as an adult now. I have had to do that quite a bit because I'm still her little baby. Even though I'm 47 years old, she just gave me a birthday party, happy birthday for being 47, now do this. This is how it helps me how we can communicate. Easy. Okay, let's see. So those are just 2 that I just wanted to throw out there. I know I talked a lot beforehand, but I really like those scenarios. I mean, those kind of tools for our toolbox. You can do it at your table, break into groups. I know there are 3 here, you can move around. What I'd like you to do for the next couple of minutes is to pick 1 or 2 scenarios that you're dealing with right now and see how you can employ either iMessage, reflective listening, or cultural reciprocity. So state what the issue is, and then have a group discussion, and then kind of what can you use to solve that? And then we're going to ask you to share. So make sure you have someone at your table that is comfortable with reporting out. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. I'm using your watch. Thank you. I'm such a visual person. Okay. Report out, please. Why don't we start with this group? You guys all set? You guys are? No, we're going to start over there. You're upset now?
We're set enough.
Enough. Okay, why don't we start here? If you tell us the situation and kind of walk us through.
Sure. At the end of my school year, I'm a speech therapist. I had a student who was working on articulation. It was an S. And I said, okay, next week we're going to go out of our speech room and we're going to practice with other people in the school. We're going to take a survey. What are some questions you might want to ask so we could practice outside of the room. And the next week when I was back, I got a phone call from the parent that said, I excuse my son from this. I'm not comfortable with this. He's very anxious about going out and speaking with other people. I don't want him to do it. And so I called her and I tried to educate her about why we were doing it, right? He needs to learn to generalize the skill, and otherwise he's only going to be able to say his S's correctly with me. And, in order for him to graduate from speech eventually, this is something he'll need to be able to do. But I understand that you're feeling nervous, and if he's anxious, he's certainly not going to be. He's not going to get the benefits from the activity. So I said, why don't we just hold off? We'll see how he's in the fall, how he feels about it, and we'll go from there. But we talked about using the reciprocity in your language. I understand how you're feeling.
What I hear you say is that he's very uncomfortable, and
that's certainly not the goal. This is the goal of the activity.
Perhaps you have some, perhaps some things he could, that we could talk about that he would be comfortable, talking to others or whatever.
Yes. What would is there something that you would feel comfortable, in doing? But as a professional, it's sort of got under my skin a little bit because I just thought, he's 3rd grade, almost 4th grade. At some point, he's got to be okay with that. But anyway.
What did you think the parent was feeling that made them say that? Or could have been feeling?
No, I think she wanted to protect him. She wanted him to feel good and not feel upset. And I can understand that. Nobody wants to see their child be upset.
Right. Anyway. What I like that you did was validated the parents' feelings, that this is, and then asked for their input, which is wonderful in building trust to get to the next level where I think, Elizabeth, you would like to have that conversation of what you just said. I know you're concerned, but he is in, I need to let you know the reality here. And what can we do this is from my point of view, I see this a lot. And yes, you want to protect him, but we're going to have to push him.
And that's I think that table mentioned, I'm always seeing the big picture. As a professional, I'm always thinking, okay, this is the goal, this is where I want him to get to. And I think, I was seeing that and she wasn't
Mhm.
yet, you know, and it's just a different perspective.
Yeah. That's great. But I don't want you to, because you have something valuable in seeing that big picture. She may have been happy that he got to school with socks that day. But you seeing that big picture, the parent also needs your help in seeing the big picture. So, you know, I want you to feel validated as well and saying, would you mind, let me show you the big picture. Because that might not be something that she has even considered. You know, it's like I shared earlier with the clothes. Either she's going to look like a 12-year-old. I needed someone to say, no, he really needs to look like the poor woman was so scared. But I needed that.
And the majority of my caseload is kids in special education rooms with much more severe needs, you know, moderate to severely disabled. And so it was just surprising to get that sort of input from this parent. You know, it's such a, you know, different situation, you know. It's just a little S issue, but it's not to her, you know. Anyway.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you. All right. You guys want to share?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually. One of the things we've been dealing with a lot in the last year or so has been children who are coming from countries with which we are not really familiar with the culture, and oftentimes the parents don't speak much English at all, so it makes it for tough going. However, some of these kids, I'm just going to highlight that last piece because I think that's what you guys said was really important. A lot of these kids are seeing 0 to 3, but then we, as 3 to 5, we don't get into the home. We really don't have any kind of relationship with the 0 to 3 folks who already have a relationship with the family, might be able to tell us a whole bunch more about this family than we know or could get even from chatting with them. And in a lot of cases, I would assume they have that trust issue that's already been established with the 0 to 3 people. And if we would go, I think you suggested that, if we could go and sit in on a couple of home visits prior to the child coming to 3 to 5, because all of a sudden, wham, nobody comes to the home. The kid's stuck on this van, comes to the classroom. Right. And it's like, I really like that idea. And I think that's something we could implement without too many problems, which might help with this whole situation.
Except for the almighty dollar problem.
The other question I had, and I think it's in the law somewhere, if the parents at 3 to 5 request sign language lessons in the home, we are obligated to provide that. Because we were talking about a home companion.
I know. Book, chapter, and verse.
I remember reading that somewhere at some point. If the parents request that, we are bound to give them services in the home or some kind of sign language.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no. It's a...
That's right, 27. I'm not sure, but I see.
Yeah, because I kept, at some point that passed my desk.
So I guess so it's hard to do that.
Okay.
That reciprocity, kind of like talking to parents when you have the language barrier.
Right.
And then when you don't get to see the parents a lot, except for maybe at a meeting if they attend or if you're able to attend, you can't do that.
Piece.
The schools don't really help, so it would be nice to be able to have that opportunity to be in the home during that transition period.
Can I comment?
Yes.
My wife actually had that same idea when we transitioned from the early intervention and we were moving into the preschool age and we were getting ready to do our first IEP. She actually invited all the members of the upcoming preschool team to come and interact with her, and none of them were really interested. So it's refreshing to hear some of you who are in that next stage say that you'd like to have that. And I would think most parents, if you explain to them the value, I mean, we happen to see the value in that up front, but if you explain that, I would think parents would be open to that.
I haven't worked with a parent who's gone through transition who hasn't asked me why can't the next group come and be here with you? It's a very standard question for that transition period.
Now, let me ask, and forgive my ignorance coming from another state, do you have, is there someone that's constant that can be that bridge, like a guide by your side or something that can, because in North Carolina, in my role as parent educator, I do birth to 22. The early intervention teacher, obviously birth to 3, and then the school system starts at 3. But we are the bridge between us. So I am in constant contact with the early intervention teacher. If there are issues, joys, challenges, whatever, I talk to the early intervention. So you don't.
If they have to guide by yourself.
Okay.
Which we do in Pennsylvania, but it's only birth to 3, so.
Oh, okay.
It's at that same.
It's at the same.
Yeah.
And then your service coordinator, in the counties I work in, your service coordinator at birth to 3 is one individual.
Exactly.
And then the service coordinators come together for the house. So you've got your new service coordinator and your current
not a
service.
team.
And they do a transition meeting.
Right.
So you're
Right.
meeting your new service coordinator,
Mhm.
but you're not necessarily meeting your providers during that transition meeting.
Right.
And then that happens 3 months or so before
Exactly.
transition. So then 90 days pass,
And
you no longer have your old service coordinator or your old.
There's a number of issues here and layers to what's being talked about. And first of all, how transitions handled, there are many things that need to happen that are within the regulations. There are many things that can happen that can be decided at a local level. And that needs to be spelled out in the local and agency coordinating council. They need to come up with a transition plan, and both groups need to discuss and determine how that transition is going to go and make it as smooth as possible. Many programs do have in 3 to 5 someone from the evaluation team who does the transition meeting with birth to 3, does get to know them and get to know the family, and then maintains connection through the evaluation process. They may or may not maintain that relationship then once the child is determined eligible and is in the program. But there is usually at least one individual that through the evaluation process does do that. Now, some programs have worked out something similar to what you're talking about here. It can be difficult because at 3 to 5, you don't know who the therapists and the teachers are going to be yet.
Exactly. Right.
You don't know who they are. So, yeah, because the IEP hasn't been written and the services haven't been determined and decided, let alone where they're going to take place, you don't know who those people will be. So, in some areas, they do know, because the evaluation team has the same people who provide the service. But depending on the size of the IU, the demographics of the preschool program and so forth, not every place can do it that way, or it's not,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of local
Right.
things that go on, as well as some systemic issues that kind of sometimes get a little bit in the way, but there should be at least one person from preschool who remains constant, at least through the evaluation process.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I do.
I think
Great idea.
there's one child right now, I think, because I just did the eval, and I'm not gonna start seeing her till she turns 3. I mean, there's like 3 weeks in there when I could go with whoever the 0 to 3 person is and just take a look at her.
Right. And maybe encouraging the birth to 3 to let the parents know that, they, like you did, they can invite both teams in. Because that's empowering the parent as well. When most
It doesn't
parents
solve
don't
this
know
whole
that.
language thing, but we did talk about some other things about that. It's a
Like
tough
what?
problem.
Give me a couple.
Well, to get together with the Somali community.
Okay.
In this particular case, like where are they? Is there some lead person there we could talk to about, the whole culture in general? And I know we've been having some in-services on cultural sensitivity.
Okay. You look like you wanted to comment.
Well, no, it's just that, I mean, there are so many layers, as Sue said earlier. I mean, this, you know, this all started with a conversation that the child has profound hearing loss right now isn't wearing aids and has no access or very little access to communication.
Wow.
Because the family is non-English speaking. When he does go to school, when he has been going to the classroom, it's signs, it's basically English signing, English signing.
I don't like
because
the
you
Molly
do total
sign.
And for whatever reason, unknown, why the child is not wearing his aids right now. It's like not understood well from what I, like, is this something that has to do with parenting, values, culture? That's why I had suggested to them, maybe you need to learn a little bit more about this community and how, you know, what family interaction with typical kids looks like.
Right.
So that was one conversation.
Are they a Muslim family? do you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Okay, so you could, I mean,
Well,
you could Google.
we
go ahead.
I went to visit them in July because
Okay.
he was not coming to school. And luckily our social worker is Muslim.
Okay.
And boy, did that open doors.
Right, that's, okay,
Yeah.
that's, right.
Yeah.
Did you get why he
Well, he
wasn't?
wasn't coming to school this summer because of Ramadan. So he's got to get up really early. We have other Muslim kids that come to my class, you
So
know.
that was number one.
Yeah.
And now in the fall we'll go back to the hearing aids.
Yeah.
So can the social work interpret for you as well?
No.
No, okay.
And she's retiring.
Oh, gosh.
I think as I'm re-listening to the conversation that we had over here, I think that, you know, a frustration or a difficulty, you know, that sort of I have is that, you know, I really care about all of these kids doing well. You know, I really, really do. And I think that finding that line between, you know, being respectful, you know, we were talking a little bit about at the IEP meeting, Becky wasn't there, and I was at the IEP meeting, and the whole time I'm thinking, I want to ask this dad, how are you communicating with your son? How is that happening? But then in my brain, I'm thinking, I don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't want to set him up to be embarrassed. He's not communicating with him, you know, with language, because he's not signing, he's not wearing his aids, he's not, you know, so it's like that, it's that struggle that I want so badly to help these kids, you know, I want so badly to help them to communicate, and I want so badly to help the families to help them communicate, but I want to be respectful of cultural differences, of, you know, the fact that so many of these families have, you know, what we were saying, you know, 3 or 4 priorities before education, you know, so, you know, the refugees from a country that's in a civil war, you know, I mean, there are so many other things that they're dealing with, and how to, you know, because for me, you know, my focus is communication, education, you know, that's, you know, to me that's like, let's do this, you know, like let's get there, but there are so many other things that these families are dealing with, so it's balancing, you know, doing everything I can to help that child while also being respectful, while also trying to empower the parents to help their child to be successful, you know, so it's, I don't know, I think that's something that I'm always
We've all had
struggling.
families of American-born kids who didn't wear their hearing aids at home, and nobody signed too. So you know,
Right.
it's not like it's just a foreign kind
No.
of
Right, no, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
But I hear you know,
It's
that
even
all
more
the,
frustrating. 'cause you
yeah,
don't have the language.
so when he was at the family was at the meeting, was there, do you know if they understood, or was there a translator?
There was an interpreter. There was an
okay.
interpreter, you know, and then after the meeting, looking back, I mean, at one point, there was a conversation about, because we knew they hadn't been to the audiologist, because we had permission to share with the audiologist, so we had talked to the audiologist, he hadn't been there since before the hearing aids had disappeared. And, you know, so we knew that was happening, and I said, so when, you know, on Becky's list of, you must ask this question was, where are the hearing aids? She was sick, she had no voice. You know, where are the hearing aids? When's your next appointment? You know, what's happening? So I asked that question. Oh yeah, we have an appointment on May 25th. Okay, great. So I write it down on, you know, the answer for Becky's notes. You know, on May 25th they have an appointment. And then later on there was a section about, you know, what the child's pediatrician and what specialist, you know, like all of this stuff. Oh, so you're still going to Hershey you know, he said, no, we don't go to Hershey anymore, just the pediatrician. And I said, well, you know, but that's where your audiologist is. I thought, he said, oh yeah, just for the audiologist on May 25th. Okay, so we're decided that the parents leave, whatever, you know, I go to put the note on Becky's desk, and May 25th was a Sunday. You know, so there wasn't, you know, so it's like, was that a community? And I didn't know that when I was, you know, I'm like, oh great, they have an appointment and they're going, you know, and then it's like, you know, and I wish that I had realized, because that would have been an opportunity, you know, and again, it's that line between, you know, trying to help them advocate for themselves and for their child, helping them to understand how important the hearing aids are, but not putting them on the spot to be embarrassed because they're not able to do it, or it's not a priority, or they don't have a ride to get there, or, you know, like all of those things. And I think that that's something that I don't know, and, you know, and you know, sort of asking lead-in questions or open-ended questions, sometimes you don't get to that answer. So without me saying, you know, why aren't you going, you know, which
May 25th is Sunday.
right, you know, it's like, I don't know, I think that's, you know, a struggle that I have.
Right.
Because I do care, you know, like I keep going back to that, 'cause I do want them to have a way to communicate, so, I don't know.
I mean, I was just thinking of an idea. If you're having a next big meeting with them, maybe asking if they could come, let them know the time is a half an hour beforehand. And you meet with them and the interpreter and say, these are questions I need to ask you with respect so that I can help you in the next meeting.
Yeah.
And just go for the,
And
go for it.
I said too,
you
I
know?
would prefer to meet in the home because then the mother is there.
Right.
Because if we meet at school, she doesn't come.
She's not gonna come, right,
Because she's got all those other kids.
right.
So a pre-meeting.
Yeah, a
Kind of
pre-meeting to
Before
kind
everybody
of,
else shows up.
right, to allow him to save face and to, where it's not, you know, a table full of people that's intimidating. And,
Right,
you
so,
know,
and then the interpreter's already there.
The interpreter's
So it's not
there.
like sending the questions home.
yeah, that's
It's
not gonna
sending,
work,
right,
yeah,
because that
yeah.
doesn't, because there is the language.
Right.
That's actually, to have them come and
Yeah.
provide the questions.
Unless you can get to the home, I don't know if that's an option for you, but if you know, you can do that.
That's a good idea.
I just have a question, because I have a lot of, you know, families that are working in different languages, but when you're communicating from school to home, does anybody read English, or do you like use Google Translate to, like, in some of my classrooms, we need more diapers, you know, please send, and my teachers would literally like plug it in, and so it came out in Spanish. Maybe there was somebody at the school that could write it for them, but it's always a struggle, you know, how do you, just basic communication.
Oh, right. Well,
It's tough.
this year, one of the other speech therapists in our building was bilingual, so there were times when, you know, but that's not her,
Right.
yeah, and that's just Spanish, well, and it's not her role,
Role.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
she has a whole caseload of kids, you know, I mean, that's not for us to call her into the room and ask, you know, we do have for phone access to language line. So to be able to, for Becky to be able to make phone calls, that's something, you know, that we do have access to now, but that doesn't help when the parents call us, which that's been another thing, you know, for families with zero English and who call and are taught, and Becky's trying to say, I'll call you right back, you know, they're not even, you know, they can't even get that, so it's, you know, it's tough. I mean, I know, like, for progress reports for those families, I try to write as simply as I can, notes that I write, you know, as simply as I can, and we did have one family once who the dad, you know, communicated well in English, and after the first couple of days of writing notes, he called and asked if we could write not in cursive, because he couldn't read it, you know, so that was you know,
another,
so that,
right,
and
You knew he was reading.
right, and for how
Exactly.
many, and you know how many other kids, you know, go, you know, the 2.5 years or whatever that they're with us, and the parent never says, I can't read that, you know, so it was, you know, to empower the parents to advocate for that kind of thing also.
And before we do this group, one last thing I was thinking is finding someone in the Somali community, maybe if they are part of a mosque, speaking to the imam there. You should be able to Google it and, you know, give a call. Most likely there, if he's a man of learning, he will speak both because, or he can let you know who in that community will, you know, are the ones that go to the DMV with people, or, you know, because it's a community, so they may not be technical translators, interpreters, but if you can get the message across, and then you're speaking to someone that they respect in their community and helping them to give the message. So if, you know, you may say it, and okay, well, you know, we'll maybe listen, but if someone of respect that, you know, has a direct line, has been in my home, says it, then okay, this is something that's really serious and I need to listen to. So. All right, this is my powerhouse group here.
Well, we were all really, really shy and didn't have a lot to say.
Yeah.
We were talking about a scenario where as a parent, you go into a meeting, the IEP's done, everybody's there, the new teacher's there, the oldest teacher's there, mid-year change, and you're kind of blindsided. So we talked about some strategies. One of the things that we keyed into was the idea of that draft IEP. And I think those of us that work in the field know there's a draft IEP, and then there's an IEP that says draft, it's probably going to be the IEP. For some people. It shouldn't be that way, but sometimes that does happen. But one of the things that Scott was saying was just acknowledging the fact that it's hard to go into a meeting with no notes or anything. That you go in with your notes, and then we acknowledge as families or whatever that you have some recommendations, you have some ideas. Is that pretty much?
Just the idea of trying to see the perspective of the other people. And from a parent's perspective, we don't want you to come in and say this is what it is, as if it's being imposed upon us. We want to have our say. On the other hand, it's unrealistic for us to expect you to come to the table with nothing.
Right.
We'd be there for a week. So the way to resolve that is to try to see it from the other side's perspective. To even speak in sides is already setting up an antagonism, but just for us to see it from the other side of the table, which is you have to come to the table with something, and for you to see, we don't want you to impose this upon us. So you come to the table with the language. These are our proposed goals and objectives, which is different than this is what it is. So just trying to see it from the other perspective is a way to begin to resolve it, yes.
And have you sent it to you?
I had a ton.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We just had one where we had a multiply handicapped child, and I sent the IEP to the mom and proposed the draft IEP. And it was great, because she came in the day of the IEP, she had read it twice, she said. She was so pleased with some things, but she had some ideas, and we just told her it was proposed, this is.
And that gives you time to come up with, if there's anything you don't understand, it's not, right on the spot.
Well, the scenario that we discussed, that did not happen.
Right, and in this scenario, just going back.
Right, yeah, and it's not always possible.
It was written and ready to be signed.
Yeah.
Right.
But I had no idea.
And that's okay, but if you come to the table with that, making clear that this is proposed.
So my suggestion would be, if they start in with the IEP as though this is it, these are the goals, this is it, I would suggest that you would stop and say, I just want to clarify, this is a draft, right?
Right.
This is a
Like
draft,
there was a
right?
classroom change and
You're coming in
everything
with-
on
you're
all of
coming
this.
in
I
with
had
a
no
draft,
idea.
right?
Wow.
No
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really where we went. We said it's okay to sit in the meeting and say, okay, it's my understanding that's a draft, or, I'm not sure who all these people are. It's okay
Right.
for you to say, I don't know everybody.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that Crystal had brought up just is that fact, and we know that we're not born, we learn as our kids learn. So we know those early IEP meetings might be a little rougher, but just educating yourself as you go as to what your rights are. And knowing that it's okay to say, this is a draft, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely. But one of the things we discussed with became interesting to me is Rachel was the first time IEP attended a parent. And whereas we wanted for professional supply prior to, that way mom came informed. And Rachel shared with us that, she walked in and all these people in here, there were teachers that was teaching here that she had never met before. This is the first time she didn't have any clue what was on the IEP. And from what I gathered, please correct me, it intimidated Rachel to the point that Rachel just bust out in tears. Okay, here was the thing that I now speaking for me and just Crystal. It's such because once you walk into the IEP, the first thing the facilitator was, we're a team. No, that is not. You're a team while you're still in the locker room. You're a team. While you're still in the locker room, we're supposed to be a team. As you said, to me, that's a team when you send me the IEP ahead of time. When you introduce me a week or two before to all of the teachers. You see, before we come to the table, before we get to the floor to play ball, we're a team, even in the locker room. That's a team to me. Not when we get in there and now everyone is using the correct jargon and terminology and everybody's smiling. No, we're not a team. And you professionals that are sitting there trying to, spell out team, you're showing me that you don't respect my professionalism as a parent. Because I am as professional as you are in a different way. And so I walked in to my first IEPs a little bit more educated maybe than Rachel, because I knew the law. I knew the due process that was due to my child that I was advocating for. I knew it was due him by law, and I knew what it was that you were supposed to do in order for him to have it. So I wasn't intimidated, but the other point, Rachel, is from a smaller community.
Right,
I'm
smaller.
South Philly. I'm Philadelphia school. So we can't tell. So it doesn't matter the size of the school, it doesn't matter the size of the district. Came in a number of times, that not a draft. IEP was done and spelled out, and all I had to do was sign in the highlighted area. But I didn't stand for it because I knew, and that was the difference. We were a team. Now that we're on the floor ready to
Crystal,
play
hold
ball.
one sec. Before, let me just make this comment, and then I know Scott wants to make a comment. Sorry to interrupt. I know that was kind of your scenario. What I'm hoping in what you're hearing is you can take that back. And if you need one of us wonderful professionals in here to help you write that down, we will do that. Because I know you're in you shared that you were in
This was the older child and my older child.
Okay.
I mean, it's gonna be all different now. What's the older
Right.
one?
But now you know you can walk in with, okay, this, and I know you'll get the book, but you walk in with, okay, I know what I'm gonna ask. So you have tools in your toolbox. Scott.
If I misheard what you said, I apologize in advance, but I thought I heard you say that receiving the draft in advance is not required.
No, it isn't, so that won't happen.
But let me stop you,
everywhere.
but let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
You stating that, even within this context, no, we're reducing this all of a sudden to a list of things that are required and things that are not required.
Yeah.
And from the parent side of the table, you just change the rules of the game. Because all of a sudden, the team dynamic is completely gone.
Right.
It's-
No, what I wanted to help clarify is that even though that may happen sometimes, I wouldn't necessarily look for that to happen all the time. You're not always gonna get an IEP ahead of time for you to review. According to the timelines that the folks need to keep and so forth, and timelines they run up against, that may more than likely not be something that typically happens.
But is it within the
does.
parents, they can ask for that?
You could ask for that, and if they were able to do that, I think the majority of professionals,
Yeah.
would
If you gave us like a
definitely
month
comply.
or even 2 weeks, I think we could probably.
But sometimes that's not gonna be able to happen.
But as long as the families know they can ask for
Sure you can
it.
ask, and the
From our point of
majority
view,
of folks would be happy to try to accommodate that. Will it always be able to happen? Especially with initial evaluations, it might be more likely to happen on those that occur after the child's been in program. But for initial evaluations, when you're often coming up against very tight timelines, that would probably be when it may not be able to happen. That's probably the one you'd like to have the most.
Right,
Would be the initial one. The other thing I was going to say, is it Rachel?
Yes.
Is that never ever should you walk into a meeting and not know that there were going to be certain people there.
Yeah, there was a classroom change gonna happen. The new teacher was there. I had no idea who she was.
Okay.
They never even introduced me to her until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
That is not, yeah.
So, first of all, there's an invitation that needs to be sent to you prior to the meeting. It must be sent within a reasonable amount of time to give an opportunity to look and see who is going to be at the table. And if they're going to,
something like that.
okay, they should send you an invitation.
But I don't think she was on there.
Okay, now, if somebody is ill and can't be there, they can substitute another person. So let's say the speech person couldn't be there. They could substitute another speech person, but at the beginning of the meeting, you should be informed of that, and that person's name, the other person's name would be crossed off, and it would say absent, and they would fill in the name of the other individual.
They didn't even tell me till the end of the meeting that there was gonna be a classroom change. Like, I had no idea of any of it. And it was just before Christmas last year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
So.
And it's not like he was 4, like he was 8. So, but this isn't even our child with learning or he just has a learning disability.
Okay.
He's not even a hearing loss child or anything, so it wasn't. And it was probably just, we've been trying to get this learning disability diagnosed since like pre-K. And they just kept feeding me a bunch of stuff until finally the middle of third grade. And then they kind of wrote it all up, but it all happened so fast that. And then we've been running all over with the twins, because our twins, we actually, our daughter with the hearing loss has a twin brother, and they're two. So we're extremely busy with all of that. So, but I know I learned a lot about it now, though. So maybe,
Good, good.
you know,
That's, and you know, you, I don't know if your county or area has PTI advocacy. You may need to, you know, have someone that is an advocate for you that can help you, because you're a parent. And you need someone to help you to know what T's to cross and what I's to dot. That's
with Olivia, though, our teacher of the deaf that we have now is actually birth to 3 all the way through school age. She does birth to 3 on the side, so she'll be with us through all of that.
That's
so
good.
that will be helpful.
right. That'll be helpful. Good. 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 Well, I know we didn't solve all the world's problems, but this was great discussion. And you know, just for all of us, if this was a microcosm of the world, I can die and go to heaven and be happy. I am so impressed and grateful for all that you guys have shared. Just, you know, your experiences, your knowledge. And so I really applaud all of you. Just, you know, this is just a conclusion. You know, it doesn't matter if we really agree. The goal is that we recognize, well, the issue is, the most important thing is that we have the same goals for our children, to be productive members of the society, whether you're a teacher or a parent, for them to be happy and to get the best education. I like this. And I didn't put in professionals, but you know, people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care, you know. And Maya Angelou quote that I saw was, people really don't remember what you say, but it's how you feel, how you leave them, how you make them feel. That is the most important thing. And that doesn't trivialize it, but at the end of the day, from a parent point of view, having professionals, I mean, like you guys, to support, and I feel that to advocate. What you do for us as parents is you empower us to be great advocates for our children, but you also empower us to be great advocates for one another. And on the professional side, having parents, you know, like you guys that are just willing to get in there and ask the questions, it pushes our envelope, helps us to be better professionals, teaches us what we can do to help your family that's different than your family. So we are the scale, you know, it's equal ends of the scale, and we're both very important in our child's life. Thank you so very much for a wonderful afternoon and all that you guys shared. I know I gave you some hard work. These are just some references. If, in fact, you want any of this, you can email me. My information should be there. My cards are here, and I will be happy to share that with you. Thank you so much for a great day.